Hey y'all, welcome to I Got a Story to Tell. I'm your host, Niambi Kiesha, holistic wellness practitioner, hoodoo spiritist, and Bronx native. And during our time together, I will share some of my musings on all things life, spirit, plants, and parenting. So get comfortable and let's dive right in. Hey y'all, welcome back to another week of the I Got a Story to Tell podcast. I'm your host, Niambi Kiesha. And this week we are going to pick up where we left off. Last week we talked about lessons from the eclipse, and we are still in eclipse season, right? Eclipse season spans a full moon and a new moon. So when we talked last week, we talked about the full moon in Pisces, and coming up this Sunday, we will have the new moon in Virgo. And so I decided to start this week off with a story. Today is the sixth anniversary of the passing of my mother. My mom passed on September 15th, 2019. And of course, I found myself reflecting on the day, as is to be expected when I woke up this morning. But even last night, I wasn't sure, like, where did I need to be? What did I need to be intentional about doing for myself? Um, in this season and on this day, right? I was working with a mentor a couple of years ago, and even with my therapist actually back in 2019. And she was actually the first one that said it, and then my mentor repeated it. I was working with a mentor maybe a couple of years ago, and she said, you don't have to let these days sneak up on you, right? You know they're coming, so you can anticipate them. You can at least put something in place, and if the day goes different, then the day goes different. But you don't have to continuously be caught off guard. And while that might seem like a like no brainer, obviously I know the day is coming up. It didn't necessarily cross my mind to be intentional about at least knowing where my go-to place would be, or what my go-to thing would be if the day got too heavy for me, right? And so, like I shared, it was the 6 year anniversary. And obviously, every year in between, 2019 has shown up differently for me. But what I'll share is in 2019, the morning of September 15th, it was a Sunday. And I was on my way to church. My older brother, my nephew, and one of my cousins were at my mother's home in New York. My brother was her primary caregiver. My brother and my nephew were her primary caregivers. And by this point, we knew that her health was declining. And so there had been a couple of things leading up to it. Like I said, it was a Sunday. So I had seen her the Sunday before. I flew home and went home the weekend before. I saw her that Sunday, and then we navigated through the week. And so, as I was getting ready to walk into church Sunday morning, I found this article that essentially, when I look back on it, it was sharing tips for caregivers to navigate through the final stages of a loved one's transition. And because my mother was at home, it was likely that that transition was going to happen at home. And so it talked about all of the different things that you may see happening in the body and so forth and so on. And I was in Charlotte, my family was in New York. So I was on my way into church. I sent them a text message, all three of them together. I shared some thoughts, let them know that I would be praying for them, asked them to let my mom know that I would be praying for her, shared this article, went into church. Now, the church that I was attending at the time, I was attending Elevation Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. at the Ballantyne location. So if you are familiar with Elevation, Elevation is a multi-site church. And so there's one site where the pastor is live and in person and preaching, and then it streams out to the satellite locations. And so I have been attending Elevation for 3 years by this point. And never in my years of attending did we take traditional communion in the church. Um, I was not born and raised in a church. I've shared this story before as well. I joined the church with my now ex husband, joined his family's church in New Jersey. It was a Baptist church. We were very involved. I was a deaconess. He was a trustee. So I did not come from a church background, but in my 20s into my 30s, I was in the church, very active, very involved, communion every first Sunday. But Elevation Church was not set up in that way, and I had never seen them take communion. Now, again, this is September 15th, so I don't know that it was a special occasion. I don't recall it being any type of special occasion. It wasn't Easter. It wasn't New Year's Eve. It wasn't any of that. And I walked into the church, obviously full of emotions, and found my way to a seat. It is a very large church. Found my way to a seat, sat down, trying to keep myself composed because this was very heavy. Um, and at some point, I realized that we were going to take communion. And so, if you've ever taken communion in a church, you have some churches that like pass around the actual tray with the little cups of either wine or grape juice. And then some people will pass around a tray with the individual crackers. But nowadays, they have sort of like the communion kits that you can use where the juice is in the bottom half, the crackers on the top, and you just pass it around and you take one. In that moment, I was thinking to myself, we've never taken communion. We've never taken communion before. Okay. There's a song that Elevation Worship sings. It had just been released when I first moved down here in 2016. So again, this was now 2019. They had released a number of songs by this point, but it the song that resonated with me was called "Do It Again," and the lyrics say, "I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again." And as we were taking communion, Elevation Worship started singing that song. And I was overcome with emotion. So I make it through the service. Um, Everything is fine. The preacher preaches. I don't even remember what his sermon was about, but I remember communion and I remember the song. Make it out to my car, and my brother calls me and tells me that my mother transitioned. Of course, I lost it. But in conversation, at some point, I don't know when, I don't know if it was that conversation or a little while later, or if he said it happened a few minutes after you sent the text message, but somehow I gained the understanding that I am almost positive that my mother transitioned while I was taking communion in Elevation Church for the first time in 3 years, and Elevation Worship was singing "Do It Again." And so that has stuck with me. That day, I can remember it vividly. I can hear myself. I can hear how hysterical I was in the car at her services that night. I don't want to say it haunts me because it doesn't, but in human understanding, if you could imagine that, right? So now, fast forward 6 years to today. Why am I telling this story? So, my mother passed on a Sunday, and then it was either Monday or Wednesday at the time. A girlfriend of mine, my yoga teacher, the first yoga teacher that I attended class with when I moved to Charlotte, was teaching a class, deep stretch yoga. And by this point, we had become friends on Facebook. And so I shared by later on that Sunday that my mom had passed and that we would be, my brother and I would be sharing more information on her services, so forth and so on. So by the time, I want to say it was either Monday or Wednesday of that week came, it was I believe it was Monday, because it was really like literally the next day. I had not processed through, had not spent any time with anybody, and I was just sitting in my house, just dumbfounded, really, for lack of a better word, and trying to figure out what I was going to do not to lose my mind. And so I decided to go to my girlfriend Robin's deep stretch class. And I've told this story before. Um, about how I went to the class. I knew that she knew. Either she had maybe like put a reaction to my post, or maybe I just assumed that she knew. I'm not sure. We didn't talk about it, but we were friends on Facebook. And I went to class. I got on my mat, fully intending to move through the practice. And then at some point, I found myself just curled up in a ball crying. And I could feel Robin's presence as she moved through class, teaching everyone else. She never directly came to me, but I could sense that she was holding space for my pain and my agony on my mat, but allowing me to navigate through it myself. And then after class, I got up, got myself together, was still a wreck. She embraced me. She held on for a long time. No words were spoken, but it was clearly understood. And I went on about my day, went on about my evening, went on about my mother's services, went on with my life. Subsequently, that experience, I will say, long of the short of it, led to me choosing to explore yoga teacher training, because I just really felt if I could hold space for someone in this way, then my work will be done. So I began my yoga teacher training journey, and here we are 6 years later. So last night, when I was trying to decide how will I prepare, or what will I prepare for myself, where will I make sure that if it all goes awry, I can go there? Like, will I mentally decide I'm going to go for a walk on the greenway, or I'm going to go to the mountain? And I remember Robin's deep stretch classes on Mondays. And so I signed up for class today. I moved through the day. I had work today, and there was not a lot of emotion around the passing of my mom. And that's always just an interesting thing for me, because I think psychologically there's a part of me that feels like, is the lack of emotion, equivalent to me getting used to this? And I remember at one point early on I struggled with moving forward in my life, because it felt, you know um like a betrayal. It felt like a betrayal for me to be able to move forward and have happiness and not be grieving my mother's loss indefinitely. So I just say that to say there wasn't a lot. There was enough other stuff going on today that kept me moving, moving, moving from the time I got up to the time I got to work to the time I got to class. And it wasn't until I got to class and landed on my mat that it all came down on me. And I felt it in my body. I felt it in my abdominal area. I felt it in my lower back. I felt it in my legs. I felt it all through my body. And somewhere in my mind, I kept thinking, I'm going to lose it in here. I'm going to lose it in here. And I wasn't trying to not lose it. I think I was just trying to prepare myself to lose it, for lack of a better word. And so I moved through the practice. I could feel the release. I could feel the energy. I could feel the use of my breath. This is why I love yoga, because it is so much more than exercise. And if you truly commit to the practice, you will realize the power of your breath and what your breath can, usher your body into, and that we can manage and get through most things between the power of our thoughts and the power of our breath. And so I moved through this practice and felt releases and just all sorts of things happening in my body. And then at one point, when we were in our final pose, Shavasana, which is a pose of meditation, it's a pose of stillness, I felt the overwhelm come down. And my mind initially thought we were going to cry. But for the first time, I had an experience of detachment around the passing of my mother. And so, for the first time in this meditative state, instead of me in my physical being crying, I saw, heard, and felt 2019 Niambi hysterical in the car. I could feel the pain, I could feel the intensity, I could feel all of that in my body, but tears didn't come to my eyes. And in this meditative state, I could sense myself hugging and embracing and reassuring the version of me that was navigating losing my mother. And that was an experience that I have never had around the loss of my mother. I share this today because, like I said, I intend to talk about the second half of this eclipse season. And I feel like the first half of this eclipse season was very heavy, was very emotionally charged, was very wired, was very hysterical, was very me the day I lost my mother. And I'm finding myself coming out of the fog, and I'm finding myself being able to reassure that version of me. And I'm finding myself still being able to move toward what life has to offer with joy and expectancy and anticipation. And I just feel like it was the perfect expression of what is happening with these lunar, I mean, not lunar, with these eclipses. So, just a reminder, on Sunday, September 21st, we will have a new moon in Virgo that will be an eclipse, right? A solar eclipse, I believe. But remember that on August 22nd, we had a new moon in Virgo. And the reason why this is important, that was called the black moon because we often don't get two new moons in the same sign, right? And so it really just depends on how the calendar falls if we get two new moons in the same sign. I say remember this because the lunar cycle is a cycle. It is a 4-week cycle. So while we say eclipse season, this particular eclipse season, I don't know if this happens every eclipse season, but I can tell you about this one. This one started with a full moon and is ending with a new moon. But what that really means is this eclipse season started in one lunar cycle and is ending in another, because the new moon is the beginning of the lunar cycle. So it wasn't this eclipse, this full moon eclipse, that started this cycle. It was the new moon in Virgo from August 22nd that started that lunar cycle. 2 weeks later, there was a full moon in Pisces. And 2 weeks after that, that lunar cycle is done. So if you think about it, Virgo is about order. It is about getting your affairs in order. It is about the physical body. I shared maybe 2 episodes ago about the importance of knowing where Virgo is in your chart. For me, Virgo is in, I want to say, my second house of assets and resources. And so for me, it was about how do I talked about this in the episode about the importance of me being well in my body, taking care of myself, juicing, moving my body, getting my rest, all of those things, right? In order for me to walk out my life's work, which will contribute to my resources and assets. So that started that lunar cycle. And then when we look at the Pisces full moon, which also happened to be an eclipse, it was the release of boundaries, paying attention to boundaries. Pisces is about endings because Pisces is the end of the astrological calendar, not the astrological calendar, the zodiac, right? So Pisces is the last, Aries is the first. So Pisces is about endings, closing out. So tying this all together, we started with a new moon in Virgo that for me was in my second house of assets and resources that said, how do you need to take care of your body, tend to yourself in order to be able to show up in your career in a way that will fuel your assets and resources. And then the Pisces full moon came behind that and said, okay, so now what relationships do you need to release in order to support this work? What relationships do you need to nurture and build? What partnerships, what collaborations? That's what I do for work. My work is partnerships and collaborations and people connections. And so, which ones are no longer serving you, right? I shared on my Instagram about a business relationship where somebody was playing in my face and trying to take my money. Not in this season, right? So it's realizing that these things are not standalone things. What happens in this new moon feeds what happens in the next new moon or the next full moon. What's happening in this eclipse season, we're planting seeds and we can look back on it 6 months from now in the next eclipse season. Or you can look back 6 months ago and see where you were in March, which was the last eclipse season. So I'm just sharing that it's important to realize these things are building blocks. When I talk about using the energy of the cosmos to understand how to navigate life, that's why this is bigger than horoscopes, right? It's journaling, it's keeping track, it's keeping a astrology journal if you want to, and keeping track of what happened in this eclipse season. What intentions did I set? What did I do over here? What were my thoughts? What did I think I needed to release? How's that coming along? Right? And so I'm saying all this to also say that means that this new moon on Sunday, while it is an eclipse and it's in eclipse season, it is the beginning of a new um, lunar cycle. So if you feel yourself coming out of the fog, if you feel yourself being able to detach and separate and be intentional about showing compassion, care, love, and concern for past versions of yourself, right? But being prepared to move forward with this new version of yourself. Know that that is in alignment with what is going on with this upcoming eclipse on Sunday. So the question sometimes gets asked, what should I be doing? Oftentimes in eclipse season, you don't have to do anything, just be aware. The energy is so potent, so high, so strong, so moving, right? That you don't have to do a lot of rituals and things of that nature. But what I will say is, full moons are never the time to truly manifest in the way that we use the term manifestation. Full moons are the halfway point of the lunar cycle. And so that means that 2 weeks prior in the new moon, that's when you set intentions. That's when you write down your manifestations. That's when you do your vision boards. That's when you let the big ideas flow, right? And then 2 weeks later on the full moon, you revisit, you revamp, you maybe scratch some things, maybe add some things, but you're adding on to the foundation that was established in the new moon. So, what we have coming up on Sunday is a new moon that offers us the opportunity to plant some seeds, to begin creating a foundation. Again, you don't have to do a lot because eclipse energy is fast, hot, and heavy. But even just thinking about, visualizing, imagination of the life that you desire, that in and of itself could be enough. You don't have to do a whole bunch of rituals and this and that and burn it, write it. And I'm not dismissing those things because y'all know I'm a ritual girly. But I'm just saying, when the energy is so high, sometimes all you might really need to do is find time to sit outside in the sun with your feet where, if you know me, in the grass, right? Taking deep breaths, lay back, cloud gaze. Look up at the clouds and see what kind of shapes you see, what kind of images you see, what story are the clouds telling you, right? Take some warm baths, drink some warm lemon and honey water or tea, whatever you want to call it. That's a form of manifestation as well. Allowing yourself to feel the ease or the joy or the abundance or the accomplishment that you desire to call in, creating moments and opportunities for your body to experience those things. So as we head toward this new moon on September 21st, if you do feel inclined, because the other piece of it is listen to your body, honor it. If the clouds haven't lifted for you, if you are not raring and ready to go, honor that. But you may notice that they're lifting a little bit, that you're starting to feel a little better because the energy is truly shifting. And so, if you feel so inclined, this new moon is one that would support intention setting because it's going to wrap up eclipse season for the next 6 months. So, some of the intentions that we set right now, some of the thoughts that we have, some of the things that we visualize about, some of the things that we desire to call in, those seeds are going to be germinating and, producing between now and March of 2026, which also then is going to be the beginning of Aries season. So that's what I'm saying. It's all stacked and layered. You plant some seeds and intentions now, you nurture it, you think about what you need to do, you come up with a plan. We're about to go into winter season. Maybe you use that time of hibernation for reflection and thinking and how would I like to do things different and what do I want to see, right? When we get to that point of the year where I know everybody might not do New Year's resolutions, but just when you are having those moments of reflection, right? I share that the astrological calendar does not follow the Gregorian calendar that we do. So while December is the end of the calendar year, it is still winter season. It is still a season of hibernation, of closed in, of reflection. And you might not feel ready to put the pedal to the metal at that point. But by the time March comes, by the time Aries season comes, by the time the next eclipse season comes, now you might be starting to thaw out. Now you may have had time to think about what is no longer working for you in this season of your life, what worked before, what's not working now. And not only what's not working now, what might even be working right now, but is not working where you're going. That's that real forward thinking, right? When I start thinking about things, there are things that are actually working right now in my life. And I express gratitude for them, but I'm also very clear that I'm not staying here forever. So there's certain things, certain dynamics. There's some things that are working right now that I'm going to let them work as long as they work. But I'm also aware that I'm not staying here forever. So I have to start putting some things in place to start moving and growing and navigating for where I'm going. So, in summary, I just wanted to share, like I said, I started out, today is the anniversary of the passing of my mom, and I will say that it is a very interesting journey to navigate. That's the best way for me to sum it up. There's good days, there's not so good days, there's moments. I'll tell you, this morning, I got up and my family put in the group chat, someone, I think one of my mom's sisters, my aunts, put something about my mom passing in the group chat. And I just had to chuckle because as I read what she put, which it was very heartfelt and very nice, what I heard in my head was when my mother used to say, like if I started going rambling, or any of us, me, my children, um, my nephews, my cousins, my mother was all about like, slow it down. You're not gonna speed me up with you. You're not gonna, create chaos or urgency in my life because of your tomfoolery. But she will always say, hold on. That's just how she used to say it. She'd be like, hold on, knee. Like if I was just going, exclamation points everywhere. She'd be like, hold on. And it just made me chuckle because that was her too, right? And so in true honesty, when we reflect on people that we've lost or that have transitioned, we reflect in these very gentle amazing, all of the wonderful things that they did, but what they also brought us was the hold on. When I think about, okay, thank you, when I think about eclipse season, the Pisces eclipse, about boundaries in relationships, that was the hold on. That's what she was telling me this morning. Like, no, everybody doesn't get to run rampant through your life. Everybody doesn't get to show up any old kind of way that they want to. Everybody doesn't get to create urgency and emergency in your energy because of something that they did. My mother was very big on that. And she didn't use language like boundaries, but I'm now understanding that's exactly what it was. She refused. She refused to have her peace disturbed. But what I now understand is the only way to do that is to have boundaries with everyone, even your only daughter, even your only son, even your grandsons, even your sisters, even your nieces and nephews, right? I shared a story on Facebook about how I used to text her and I would say mother, and I would type the word mother and I would put like exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And I did this for a while. And finally, so my mother was an educator. My mother was a teacher, and then she moved up to assistant principal. She was a mentor, but she was an educator my entire life. And finally, one day she said, "Is this an emergency?" And I was like, "No, I just wanted to know what you were doing, or like, I just wanted to know where you were." And she said, "Well, can you use a period?" I was like, "What?" The exclamation points were not working for her because exclamation point meant emergency. And if there were an emergency, she was fully prepared to respond and show up for me as such. But me texting her at 7:45 in the morning while I'm sitting outside of Dunkin' Donuts on my way to work, just wanting to chat, to her warranted a period, not an exclamation point. So, in honor of my mother, I'm going to end this episode by saying don't let people, things, situations, jobs, dynamics, credit, okay? Y'all may not have seen that one coming, but even credit, um, things that are going on in our country, don't let anything, anyone, anybody, any situation put an exclamation point in your life where it's not warranted. Require periods where they are needed so that you can respond accordingly. So, um, I wasn't sure if I was going to record tonight. I'm glad that I did. Um, and in honor of my mom, I thank you for joining this week's episode of the I Got a Story to Tell podcast. I'm your host, Niambi Kiesha, and I'll see y'all next week. All right, bye.